The rumors were greatly exaggerated. Xbox and Microsoft just released a new podcast, essentially a 20-minute snippet into the future, as well as their overall design philosophies and the trends they want to follow going into the future. And this is following immense speculation online that Xbox will be essentially going multi-platforming and transitioning more to a publisher role, and possibly even exiting the hardware scene. Well, short answer no, long answer, well, no, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about the direction of the gaming industry going into the future, the direction Xbox and Microsoft are taking, and how Nintendo and Sony may even follow suit. So what was the big conversation that's been happening for the past couple of weeks? It has been that Xbox is essentially going to port all of their exclusives to both Nintendo and PlayStation. That, at least right now, is not happening. They came out and said that there's going to be 4 games that are already on Xbox for over a year that are smaller projects that will be ported to Nintendo and PlayStation. I believe the exact list got rumored or announced by Tom Warren, but they are not essentially Indiana Jones and Starfield. Those games will remain exclusive to PC and to Xbox. And funnily enough, in a lot of ways, to me, the biggest takeaway coming out of this podcast from Xbox is essentially them doubling down on hardware in certain ways and not in different ways. We gotta talk about this. Wario64 on Twitter got the perfect snippet, from this entire section. And I'll leave links to various tweets and articles in the description down below, but essentially, one of the quotes that came out of this conference, or this podcast, if you want to call it that, is essentially, quote-unquote, "We've got more to come. There's some exciting stuff coming out in hardware that we're going to share this holiday. We're also invested in the next generation roadmap. What we're really focused on there is delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in hardware generation, which makes it better for players and better for creators and the visions that they're building." Now, I said it's a little bit more nuanced than them moving traditionally to a publisher role. I think one of the things I talked about on my Discord not too long ago is coming to pasture, and that is the idea that Microsoft, and this has been a kind of a popular talking point for a while for a lot of people, is that Microsoft wants to move and transition to a role where they have a finger in every pie, essentially, where they have some hardware out there that's traditional console based that you can choose to have, so they can have some foot in that traditional console scene. They are on PC, essentially. They have their own launcher on PC. Microsoft, owns Windows. They have their games on Steam, the biggest storefront for PC. They have Game Pass on PC. They have Xbox Play Anywhere. Some of their games are on multiple, different pieces of hardware, like Minecraft, like Call of Duty, like these 4 games that are going to get ports coming up. They've had games on other hardware before, they've been multi-platform before and still are, but it seems like they want to have a finger in every pie. And while they didn't just come out and say it, the new generation, they talked about the specific wording, delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation. A lot of talk, and some people are theorizing that this means they're gonna come out with a handheld. I don't think that's outside the realms of possibility. I think being able to play on the go in some capacity, like a Nintendo Switch, or like a Steam Deck, like on a mobile device like a phone or a tablet, that is a massive segment of the market. Undeniably so. And it's only growing and growing and growing. And if you're looking at this from Microsoft's POV and you're like, okay, we're lagging behind Nintendo and PlayStation in traditional console sales, a lot of people like having these tablet-esque devices. Why wouldn't we have something in that market? So it's kind of along the lines of what I've been talking about with Sony's strategy with the PlayStation, where you already have this large market share, and essentially what you have to do to continue gaining momentum is prevent bleedage. Prevent people going from your console, from your ecosystem to elsewhere. So what you want to do is make sure you have some version of what the competition has that you may not already have. So they have PS Plus being some version of Game Pass. Is it as good as Game Pass or as valuable? Not really, but it's some version of what the competition offers. Did they have a mobile device? Well, not since the Vita. So what did they do? They came out with the PlayStation Portal. Is it as good as, say, the Switch or the Steam Deck? I would argue no, but again, it's some version of that. to make sure that their player base doesn't feel like they're missing out on some new tech that the competition has. PlayStation even has their own VR headset. Again, making sure they have some version to keep their players where they are. Xbox, I feel like, is trying to do the opposite, where, okay, well, we have a few games that do really good, like Minecraft and Call of Duty, but in terms of traditional sales figures, and for these new big heavy-hitting exclusives, we've been kind of falling behind. So what can we do? We can put a finger in every pie and make sure we have some kind of market presence here. And if you pair that alongside putting out more and more better and better games, then there's a natural synergy between the two, because I think Xbox's lineup for 2024 is easily one of its strongest in years, so long as the games deliver. They look like they can, but they need to not flop like not flop in terms of numbers, but flop in terms of reception like Starfield did. They need to be bangers. They need to be, this is an amazing experience, and they need that time and time again. They have the IP, they need to nail the execution. And I think something that Phil Spencer talked about but didn't dwell on is a really interesting talking point going into the future. And that is, he said that he believes going into the future, exclusives, like pure exclusives, will make up a less and less important segment of the industry. And I think to some degree he is absolutely correct, and personally I hope he is. I do not like the concept of exclusives. I understand why they exist. In order to get a console to succeed, you need to have a firm, solid base of exclusives that at least has been the formula up to now. It's why Nintendo and PlayStation have done so well recently, because when they put out exclusives, generally speaking, they're really good and well received. Xbox, not so much. Every now and then they may put out a banger, but they're few and far between, and they're not consistent in this regard. It doesn't matter if you have a bunch of great IP that's well beloved if your execution fumbles. And while I may have a bit of a disdain for live service games, or at least what they have become in recent years, it is undeniable the market share they have right now in the gaming industry. And a large part to further and propagate the longevity and life cycle of a live service game is by making sure that it has a sizable population. Nobody wants to play a multiplayer game that has few people in it. People like feeling like they're part of the next great thing or some kind of big thing going on that's popular. So funnily enough, when it comes to these live service games, being multi-platform and being cross-play kind of makes sense for that ecosystem. For instance, do we think Minecraft would be as big as it is if every version of Minecraft was its own insular experience? Probably not, right? A large part of the success of Minecraft has been how easy it is to play with anyone. Well, easy in quotation marks. Personally, I am primarily a PC gamer. It is my platform of choice, it is what I enjoy, and is what I think is better or best to play on for the consumer, especially in the modern day. So when games go multi-platform, I'm generally happy about that. When Xbox decided a few years back to port all their games going into the future on PC day one, I viewed that as good news. I don't take some kind of pride and joy in the plastic box that I have from some multi-million, if not billion-dollar corporation. I'm not going to be some flag bearer for them. It just ain't going to happen. And I've said before, the console wars, at least in terms of consumer against consumer, repping your multi-billion-dollar corporation, is a typically anti-consumer practice. And this is a conversation that a bunch of people on the internet tend to participate in that very well may be a vocal minority compared to everybody else, but the conversation existing to begin with, I tend to find is anti-consumer, as it pits consumers against each other instead of rallying together to find the best deals and to unify our voice to get better deals and, well, yeah, I guess that just works. Better deals for the consumer. You may be asking, well, why is Microsoft doing this? Isn't selling exclusives the primary way to generate a bigger population to your console ecosystem? And that has been the case for a while. However, it's important to note that, generally speaking, and in the past, and I think this applies to Xbox and PlayStation right now, but don't quote me on that. Generally speaking, you sell the console as this thing called a loss leader, where for every console you sell, you are losing money. But the idea is that you lock people into your ecosystem, so you make that money back, and then way more on top of that on software sales or things like controllers or peripherals or whatever. You make your money back on the back end, and you use the console at a cheaper price to try and lure people in. That has been a formula that many people and many consoles have used for decades now, right? But remember, where does the money come into this situation? Primarily on the software side of things. The main idea and takeaway here that I'm trying to talk about is that the main method of making money here is either going to be through services or through game sales. Well, if you're Microsoft and if you're Xbox, if you can put your proverbial fingers in more pies and sell more games like that, if that's where your money's going to come from to begin with, well then doesn't that just make more business sense? And I think that's where Phil Spencer's coming from when he talks about exclusives making up a less important, not unimportant, but less important role going into the future. That the idea will be to primarily sell games and to sell a unique experience around these games. It has been heavily rumored for a while that Xbox is going to come out with a handheld device. And while they didn't come out and say that with this podcast, they kind of were like wink wink nudge nudge in regards to this, in regards to the next console generation. As I said before, quote unquote, largest technical leap that you will have ever seen in a hardware generation. Now, people are going to theorize about what that necessarily means, but to me, I kind of think Xbox is just late to the party in this regard, because we have seen the other two main consoles, Nintendo with the Switch being first here, having this handheld device be a central pillar of the experience. You can argue the Vita with, I think it's PS Now, but I think the Portal is more apt for this conversation. But depending upon the execution that Xbox handles their possible or theoretical handheld device with, it's just one of those things that we kind of need to wait and see, because we know very little about it, and do we want to spend a bunch of time speculating something that's going to probably get announced later this year, if not in a couple of years? Like, a lot of people just spent the better part of like a couple of weeks speculating that all of Microsoft's games, or at least a lot of them, an increasing number of them, will go multi-platform, and they just came out and said, yeah, 4 games, they're not even really big games either, 4 games will become multi-platform. And then did a whole bunch of conversation and theorizing going around that Microsoft may be exiting the console market, and then Xbox comes out and says, yeah, no, we're not. In fact, we're going to have the largest technical leap you'll have ever seen in a hardware generation. As a brief aside, I also think there's an element to this where, for console generations of years gone by, the big advertising feature has been this massive boost in graphical performance. Games would look better primarily, they would run at higher resolutions, more things would be on the screen, it would look more realistic, unless you're going for a specific art style direction. But we started to come to the point in the industry in regards to graphics and fidelity on the whole of diminishing returns, where things can only look so much better. And I think, and I've said this before, the main direction that graphics and the state of hardware necessarily will go from here is not necessarily to make things look better, but to add more things to the scene, or allow more things to happen simultaneously, or for things to be bigger and better in that regard. And while mobile or portable gaming has always been, really not powerful, but, popular, in terms of the power behind each of those devices, they've generally lagged far behind traditional stay-at-home consoles, or let alone PCs. But what this trend can possibly do is, when we're coming across these diminishing returns for each generation going on from here, in terms of just what more can they put out, well, that means the experience with a possible handheld device and the new emerging tech that is coming out can make that experience look and feel even better, and also run better. So it's a bit of the stars aligning in regards to the popularity of these portable devices. Things like the Game Boy, the DS, the PSP, these have always been really popular. There's always been a market for portable gaming. But now, the technology is starting to be able to really and truly support that, and to blur the lines, if you will, between stay-at-home gaming and portable gaming. There's still going to be some distinction for a while in regards to the quality and the interface of these experiences, but that's going to start to fade away and erode away as time goes on, as we've seen with things like the Switch or the Steam Deck. I think the important takeaway from this is, is that the traditional console scene that we have seen up to this point is kind of dying. We are seeing PlayStation, and this is where that part of the conversation comes back in, we have seen PlayStation start to port their games to PC. This is a policy that they've been doing that hasn't been talked about all that much, because generally speaking, it's extremely time-gated. Well, now we're even starting to see games published by Sony come out on PC day one. Helldivers 2. Yeah, that game, I'm literally looking at the Google article on this, from, well, I guess technically the Wikipedia, because you know they give the summary. Besides that, published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. We have seen them port other their mainline exclusive games to PC. Granted, at later dates, but who knows? That could change. As Sony maybe starts to come around to the idea that, hey, there's a lot of people on PC that are simply not going to buy the console. Why would we just not give them access to the games? If we care more about selling these games to begin with, and if that is where the money lies in the future, then why be stubborn about this? I'll be very interested to see where Sony goes from here in regards to their multi-platform behavior when it comes to porting games to PC. Xbox has already and kind of doubled down on porting games to PC. They even have a version of Game Pass that, in my opinion, is the most valuable bang for your buck one, with PC Game Pass. And they also port their games to Steam. So despite all of that, they think it's in their best interest to take that Steam cut, which I think is about 30% on each game sale, and say it's still worth it having our games on this platform, despite the fact we have our own PC launcher. If that doesn't tell you that they think pure game sales numbers are more important than necessarily drawing together an ecosystem of raw hardware sales, then I don't know what is. And I think going into the future, what they want is to make sure they have something there from Xbox. I think they understand that the mobile market and, what do we even want to call it? Like the tablet market? I'm not talking about iPads, I'm talking about things like Steam Decks, ROGs, Nintendo Switches. That style of like tablet gaming, there's a massive market for that. There really is. I think the PS Portal is trash in a lot of ways, and requires a lot of checkboxes to check if it's even going to show some kind of value to you. But it's still sold. There's a market for this. There's a market for this type of on-the-go gaming, to where the games don't just like boil down to, typical phone games and what you expect from that. People want to be able to play their games and the games they love anywhere, seamlessly, and on the go. And you're seeing massive markets in certain countries come online and be primarily mobile or on-the-go markets. You have places like Japan, South Korea, China, India. From what I've read before, and maybe it's a little bit outdated, but from what I've read, there's a lot of players there, a lot of players in other places as well, including Europe and America, that want to be able to play on the go. And we get to a point that I think Asmongold brought up not too long ago, in that the key to the console's success going into the future very well may be to offer a unique experience in lieu of a traditional console. Now, let's expand on this idea, right? Generally speaking, over the last few generations of consoles, they've become essentially just some version of PCs, with less flexibility, but generally speaking, they are some version of a PC. They're like a scuffed PC, essentially. And the lines between console gaming and PC gaming have started to blur. But generally speaking, console gaming used to succeed on the idea that it was cheaper, and just easier and more convenient. It was plug and play. You plug your console in, pop a disc in, and you can play. That's not the case anymore, largely. And we've seen the PC market continue to grow and grow and grow. We've seen the mobile market explode in popularity. But when it comes to the consoles, who's reigning king right now? The Nintendo Switch. The console, that's a hybrid. Games are still extremely important. Do not get that twisted, do not get that wrong. It is why Xbox is generally in last place when you ask anybody. But, going into the future, I don't see a reality where these consoles continue to just be scuffed PCs. Having some gimmick, like what Nintendo has been trying to do for so long until stumbling upon the Switch's success, get that gimmick, get a unique gameplay interface experience that is not offered elsewhere. Now, this tablet hybridization gameplay style is being offered elsewhere, but not in the way that Nintendo does it, where, oh, I need to go on the go now, let me just take my Switch out the dock and I'm good to go. What is Xbox trying to do? Well, cloud saves. Xbox Play Anywhere. So it's like, oh, I have to move away from my console or my PC. I can grab my other device, have my saves already in the cloud, boot it up on that device, and I'm good to go in that regard. Oh, okay. And I believe the same thing works with the Steam Deck in regards to your Steam saves. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's how that works. Convenience is starting to become king in regards to consoles, and offering some unique experience is starting to become more and more important, and if you want to read the tea leaves going into the future, it seems as if Microsoft believes it is in their best interest to invest in this idea now, rather than just try and push into a stagnant market right now. Phil Spencer talked about this a lot. Growth is important. And how do you achieve growth? Either try and monetize an existing player base even more so, or try and appeal to new players. How do you appeal to new players? Releasing better games helps a lot of that for that one, by the way. But also, offer a new experience. Because as it exists right now, and this is something I'm going to be talking about throughout much of this year, and I've already talked about quite a bit, I don't see any category where console gaming is better or even on par with PC gaming. The only one is like upfront cost. That's the only one. And even that one is nuanced. I'll talk about that one in a future video, don't worry. Time will tell where exclusivity goes from here. I don't see it completely changing overnight. I could see Sony, at least, dipping their toe even more so going into the future in regards to PC ports, and possibly experimenting with day one PC ports more and more. I think we can absolutely see that in the future. I've called for Sony to just make a PC launcher for years at this point. I don't know if they'll do that, or if they'll just stick to Steam, but I imagine they'll start to invest in PC a bit more. Because we've even heard rumors about PlayStation. Again, this is like rumors and I don't even remember the tweets I heard these from. So like take this with like a mountain of salt, right? That maybe the Vita could make a comeback next generation. Maybe. Again, mountain of salt, don't expect it, but maybe. Could this all lead to ever more increasing multi-platform releases for games? I think it could, especially if these companies have essentially a come-to-Jesus moment and realize, hey, we can have our consoles exist to attract that traditional console experience market, sure, but will we, like, stress out over the exact numbers and say, oh no, we need to sell way more of these? Not necessarily. I think they'll care more about you being in their ecosystem in some way, and in some form, some fashion. I don't see Microsoft or Xbox particularly giving a crap if you play their games on their console or on PC with Game Pass or Steam or whatever. They just want you to play their games. They even talked, Phil Spencer, I believe, even talked about this in the podcast, that with these 4 games that they're going to put multi-platform, maybe they can attract people over to Xbox. I think I've talked about that before, and I think that's a dumb way to go about it. I don't see that really working for them, but, like, give it a try. I mean, I'm not going to be opposed to more games going multi-platform. More people can enjoy these games, and more recognition can go to these great games. Cool. Thumbs up for me in that regard. I'm not some kind of like console purist, right? I'm a PC gamer largely. I own consoles because those consoles can have games that I really care about. Give me the option though, and I'll play on PC. I think the future direction of the video games industry is really up in the air, and there's a lot of potential for it to augment and change and evolve, and move away from like this traditional exclusive arms race that we have seen consoles be in since like the 80s. Move away from that and focus more on giving the consumer an interesting and fun experience through the hardware, and have the games be available pretty much anywhere else. That to me is an idealistic scenario. We would have to think about it some more and think about the possible cons. And if you can think of any, leave some in the comments down below. But from the consumer POV, I think that's a more idealistic scenario than what we currently have right now. I think the future is really bright, and I tend to be optimistic in regard to the prospects for gaming. I love gaming. I'm a PC gamer, but I love games overall. We'll have to wait and see what Nintendo wants to do in the future, because Lord help me, we cannot get a direct out of them for the life of us. But we've seen Xbox lay this groundwork for years at this point. and their future vision is starting to become a little bit more clear, and I have to tend to agree with them in terms of where they think the industry is going. Ease of access, ease of use, and being able to play anywhere seamlessly, I think is the trend in the future. Heck, even Valve, PC gaming's forefront, got in on this idea with the Steam Deck. I don't see this as being a hypothetical, I see this as being an eventuality. And if it can mean even more multi-platform games in the future, and people being able to play more and more games and having access to more and more games, that's thumbs up for me. It really is. There's obviously some risks and obviously some, potential holdups that I imagine you could think of. But I think on the whole, this is a more positive direction that gaming is going into, in my opinion. At least for the consumer. And that's primarily what I care about. Not the only thing, but primarily. But again, leave a comment down below with what you think about Xbox's latest, podcast and what they've been talking about. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about this potential trend in gaming? Or this inevitable trend, if you want to call it that instead. Let me know, I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions. And while you're down there, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day, hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.